Kia ora everyone, and welcome to the Fundraising Nest. I am with the amazing Sue Barker today, who I am delighted is supporting the Fundraising Nest and is one of our mavens, and I am inspired. One of the things we're doing at the Fundraising Nest is it's about people inspiring people, and it's about that kind of broader, it's not just about education, it's about what you learn from people. And Sue is incredibly inspirational to me. She is someone who tells it how it is. She's not afraid of being brutally honest about what needs to be done to make change for the better. And that's what connected us several years ago. So thank you so much for joining us, Sue, today. Welcome, and please tell our people who you are and what you do.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Kia ora. Yes, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm a lawyer specialising in charities law and public tax law, and I've been practising in this area of law since last century. And in that time, I have seen the impact of the legal framework for charities on charities in New Zealand, and that has really motivated me to want to work to get a better legal framework for charities. And I'm inspired by you and the work that you've done. So it's wonderful to be here today. Thanks.
Yeah, I know, but I know we've met for lunch here, and I've had conversations where we've met for lunch, and I can feel your passion, and and when you meet someone that is so passionate and you're able to have honest conversations, some things probably we wouldn't discuss publicly, but when you can really, when someone understands you and you can hear from them how much they take it on board. And I know we'll have a chat about the report that you did that came out last year, which what you've been working on the last 2 years is what a world-leading framework of charities will look like. And I know how much personally you were invested in that. It was huge.
Thank you.
So we'll just go backwards for our audience. When we are so the big piece of work that we connected on was the review of the Charities Act in New Zealand, and I think it became apparent as governments do, they change things. And so I think one of the things I'd like to hear from you is, why is it important for everyone within fundraisers, I think might think that what happens at government and how they change the law has no impact on them. Even CEOs of smaller organizations, like the service delivery side, they're under pressure, they're under resourced, they've got shit to do. But talking to you and kind of made me realize how critical this information was for them. So can you give an example of just going back to what happened in New Zealand and why it was so important to get people behind what was going on?
Well, I think it's critical because, in my view, the charitable sector, the independence of the charitable sector is as critical to democracy as free and fair elections, an independent judiciary, and a free press. It's also critical to our social cohesion. And prior to the Charities Act, New Zealand had a very vibrant, thriving charitable sector. And when I compare how passionately and vibrantly charities fought for their independence when the Charities Bill was originally going through Parliament in 2004, and compare that with the situation now, the charitable sector in New Zealand is a shadow of its former self. It has changed. The current legal framework is changing the charitable sector in New Zealand, and not for the better. And I really worry about the impact on our democracy, on our society, and on charities and all the people that they work for. And so it affects fundraisers because people get involved with charities because of their passion for the cause. And one of the things that's happening is the definition of charitable purpose is being interpreted so narrowly that charities are being prevented from doing a lot of work that people would want to support, like providing affordable housing, public interest journalism, sport, you name it, advocacy in particular, prevention, innovation, social enterprise. These are all being prevented. And charity services would say, oh, we're just applying the law. But actually, when you look at it, they're not just applying the law, they're changing the law. And the way that the framework is working, and there's so many unintended consequences, there's really no accountability back to the charitable sector. So we are, and I'm seeing it particularly with young people. We're undermining charities, and people are turning away from charities and choosing other forms of other modes of social action. So, you know, if you're fundraising for a cause, for a charity, it is important to be aware of the impact the legal framework is having. And I really do worry about what Helen Clark was giving a talk the other day. She talks about New Zealand's "she'll be right" attitude, and she said she won't be right. Yeah. We have to actually, we can't be complacent, because, you know, the benefits of democracy and social cohesion and all of these factors, they're hard won and easily lost. And once you've lost them, you know, I hate to think whether or how we would get them back. Prevention is infinitely better than cure. So, you know, I'm really concerned about the direction of travel. Yeah.
I think for some people, I think law is, you know, for me, is, you know, it's hard to read. It's hard to understand the deep words in the legislation. And when we look at your report, it's huge. And you know, where can people find digestible and kind of digestible, I guess, nuggets of what it is that is being done? You know, I think, what is a practical, where can people go to find the information on that's easy to read, digestible, to understand, that's not caught up in legislation? Yes, well, I do accept that the report is 596 pages long, and I specifically didn't do an executive summary because I thought people would just read the summary. And the point I was trying to make is that these issues are complex, and their impact is far-reaching, and you can't necessarily distill it down to a soundbite. So it has been helpful for me to have it all down there. Yeah. And since then, I've been writing summary articles, which are more soundbitey, and the value for me is that I can just refer to the report. It's like, you know, this is what I'm saying. All of the research that backs up what I'm saying is in the report. So, you know, if you don't believe me, go and have a look at the evidence, the research. But, you know, it is difficult. These issues are complex, and that's part of the problem I think that the charitable sector faces, is that I think Lester Salomon described it as the invisible subcontinent, poorly understood by the public and policymakers, encumbered by unnecessary legal limitations, and underutilised, inadequately utilised as a mechanism for solving social problems. And this is part of the problem, is that people don't understand it. I think the policymakers don't understand it. The minister is not across, you know, centuries of case law. And the net result is that we get these kind of knee-jerk reactions that create unintended consequences that are harming the charitable sector. Absolutely. So last time we caught up, we were facing the bill being passed last year. Can you give us an update? Where are we at with the bill, which we asked for a first principle review? It was completely diluted down to like you say, these small, I don't know if I should say it, but you described it as lipstick on a pig, which is a phrase. We can edit that if you want, but we might leave it in. But what an analogy! That was that was the truth of what has happened. Tell me, where are we at right now in New Zealand with the bill being passed? Well, I read all the submissions that were made to the Select Committee on the bill, and the submissions overwhelmingly call for the bill to be withdrawn, for the government to go back to the drawing board and honour its 2017 manifesto commitment to undertake a proper first principles post-implementation review of the Charities Act. The charitable sector has been waiting for a proper post-implementation review since the original bill was almost completely rewritten at Select Committee stage in 2004 and then rushed through under urgency without proper consultation. So we've got this kind of dog's breakfast of a piece of legislation that really needs a proper review. But actually, the Productivity Commission in New Zealand is doing some work on persistent disadvantage, addressing persistent disadvantage. And I've been talking with a research charity about ways of addressing that, and the importance of getting a legal framework for charities right if we want to address persistent disadvantage. And in their report that they did, they comment on the state of democracy in New Zealand, and they say we've got weak parliamentary institutions or weak democratic institutions. Parliament has little ability to hang on, I've written it down, has little ability to
induce executive actors to promote wellbeing, and the dominance of the executive over Parliament. And so this bill is actually a textbook example of all of those factors. So Labor has this policy, we're going to do a proper first principles review. The DIA doesn't want that because, you know, they won't have control over that. So they tell the minister, no, don't do that, just do this attenuated review. So we're getting policy being driven by unelected officials rather than Parliament, rather than the minister. So the minister reneges on their own policy, they do this attenuated review, and then it goes, we get this bill that reflects the fact that it's been written by DIA, and it's really all about making DIA look good to its minister. It's not about what would help charities. It goes to select committee. It's been at select committee now for a few months. And that should be an opportunity to really have a robust look at it. But really the select committee seems to have considered its role, certainly the majority, not necessarily the minority, seems to have considered its role of one of merely rubber stamping the minister's bill. So, so we're expecting the report tomorrow. I understand that some changes have been made, but I don't expect they're going to be root and branch changes. I think they're going to be more lipstick on the pig. Yeah. And so we're about to get a piece of legislation that will entrench current difficulties. And it's the other difficulty is that the whole process has been dominated by DIA, including the narrative. And DIA has couched this bill in such glowing terms. Oh, we're gonna do so much for you charities to help you, you know, continue your vital contribution. And I think a lot of people have been lulled into a false sense of security, because once you actually read the detail of the bill, it doesn't live up to its rhetoric at all. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. So, you know, but I think, again, we've got the problem that charities are so worried about their relationship with DIA, that it might affect their registration, it might affect their funding. That's another issue. DIA administers $650 million worth of funding. So they're really, I think we've got a case of Stockholm syndrome. I'm really worried that the voice of the charitable sector is much more muted. And I think they also feel that if they speak up for themselves, that somehow that's a selfish thing to do or not a good thing to do. And what I would love them to realise is that by speaking up for yourself and getting a better legal framework for charities, you are actually helping all the charitable purposes that you work for. You're helping all the people that you work for. You're helping our society and our democracy. But, you know, I'm really worried about this.
If this bill goes past, you know, if it looks like this bill is very likely to go through, and, you know, it's reversing something like this, I mean, it's not going to, you know, how do you reverse something like this? And I remember that was a powerful thing when you kind of got my attention, was that when this happens, that is it. That's what we've got for the next 10 years. Is there any chance of it being stopped at this stage?
Well, I mean, if they listened to the submissions are overwhelmingly calling for it to be withdrawn. But, you know, DIA is really pulling the strings, and they're quite happy with you know, what the bill is proposing. So what really does worry me is if this goes through, it's taken us 20 years to get to this point. And so if other jurisdictions are anything to go by, it'll be another 20 odd years before we get an opportunity to really look at these issues again, because once this goes through, DIA will say, well, we've done the review, you know, we've got the bill, it's all done. And I think a lot of charities are hoping that their call for a proper first principles review will be answered. But the problem is there's no votes in it. Unless the charitable sector speaks up for itself and makes a fuss and makes it worth politicians' while to actually address these issues, they're not going to be addressed, because the public isn't calling for it. The public doesn't understand it either. I don't think they understand charities, you know, it's a generalisation, but as a whole, I think the narrative in the media about charities is quite hostile. It's like, oh, charities run businesses, and you know.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. And so, if you're a charity, you've already got your registration, you're not in danger financially of potentially having to be deregistered. Where is the urgency for them? What is it that is at risk for them? And I know there's a piece around advocacy there. You know, these changes, it might seem to some charities, oh, it's fine, it doesn't impact us. And I think that is what charities are thinking. It's all right, it's about registration or deregistration. They've kind of, you know, they've put it into these kind of boxes. What is the impact to an everyday charity, or the potential impact?
Yeah, well, I think that's a really important question, because the way that the charitable sector is being changed is that charities are being kind of channeled into underfunded service delivery arms of government. So if you've got a government contract for service, you know, that's how charity services sees you. That's how government sees you. If you don't have a government contract, you're invisible to this government. And actually, this absolutely aligns with the policy of the Communist Party of China, who exploit charities for community service delivery to improve the often dismal provision of services, you know, in authoritarian countries, but restrict their role in wider civil society. So they'll support service delivering charities through all sorts of ways, easier pathways to registration, you know, involvement in policy, generally supporting them and encourage them. And so they may flourish in an authoritarian society or state, but they will restrict liberal democratic advocacy, rights-seeking charities. And we've seen that in Russia, we've seen that in Hong Kong, there's a battle going on in the world for a change in world order. China, I think, is you know, wanting to, the tiger wants to rear its head, and it wants to impose its authoritarianism around the world. It doesn't want this democracy. It's undermining democracy. It's working with Russia to undermine democracy, often, you know, behind closed doors. I think Iran is involved with as well.
As, you know, New Zealand is seen in the world as a leader in so much good about world society, aren't we? You know, our nuclear stance, our green, beautiful image, our, you know, the way Jacinda led, like people have got us on a pedestal that what New Zealand does is they do the morally right thing, and they're good at what they do. This kind of goes against what that image is.
Exactly, and I liken it to the proverbial frog in boiling water. You know, the rights and freedoms, democratic rights and freedoms, the ability for charities to innovate and to advocate is just being slowly eroded. All of the gains that charities made in 2004, they're just being slowly eroded, and the water's getting hotter. And I don't know if you know the story, but the frog, by the time the frog realizes that the water is boiling, it's too late. It can't jump out. And I am worried that's where we're heading. And it's the complacency, it's the she'll be right attitude, I think, because, and you know, I do have at the back of my mind, and I'm hesitant to draw comparisons, but I am really worried that is how Hitler got in. It was complacency that allowed Hitler to come to power. We do actually have to be aware of the history, because otherwise we'll be condemned to repeat it. We actually have to, you know, there's that cliche that democracy takes eternal vigilance. You can't just, you know, it's a garden that needs tending. You can't just let it look after itself, because it won't.
Yeah, and do you think that, you know, testing the waters in the charity sector is a nice, you know, potentially the charity sector is some, you know, we can try enforcing these things and kind of see how it goes, and then where does it go from there? You know, it's like you say, the charity sector is vulnerable. It feels like there's no true kind of independence of the governing body, you know, and that is all very concerning. I think so looking beyond New Zealand, and I think you've articulated really well the situation we're in, and we've got a lot of the Nest is looking after Australians too. What is Australia, you know, can you make a comparison with what Australia is doing and what they've done well in this space?
Australia and New Zealand are like just chalk and cheese at the moment. I think Anthony Albanese and Andrew Lee. Andrew Lee has written a book about the charitable sector or civil society more generally, but I heard him speak once, and he was saying that we've all become very kind of introverted, isolated, and he describes it as a focus on me, and he would like to open it up so that people come back together in clubs, and it's more of a we, from me to we. And the advantage, I think, of the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission is that it is independent, and it is required to report to Parliament, and it is accountable to the charitable sector. So the things that happen in New Zealand, they just wouldn't happen in Australia. I think that another advantage that Australia has is one of scale. So there are academics, there are the whole charitable legal sector, and the charities with policy capacity. So, you know, they just wouldn't get away with it in Australia.
Yeah. And that's the same. I know when the demise of checks happened and I had to negotiate, you know, manage the sector through that. It was the same, you know, it was Australia was that would never be allowed to, and with 9 months notice, there's no other country that would be allowed to happen. But we were a testing ground because you know, we were vulnerable because of our size, and I felt absolutely that they took advantage of that, and we were powerless to do anything, and they were just, we're doing it, and we'll prove that it can work there. But you're right, you know, there's no way Australia would have taken the demise of checks because the sector would not have accepted it.
Yeah, I mean, we were known as having the fastest law in the West, and in many ways we still do, because we don't have a federal system like Australia does. We don't have two houses like Australia does. We're a small unicameral nation, and it makes it really easy to get laws through. Now, that can be a good thing, and we have been described as the social laboratory of the world because we can get laws through often that just can't in a federal environment. But that also has a downside, is that we get this law that's not properly thought through, doesn't have a mandate, you know, it's full of unintended consequences. You know, it has its pros and its cons.
Is there another country in the world with similar kind of political, you know, government structures to us, same size, that are doing it better?
Ireland, I think, is quite a comparable country. And actually, I was reading an article the other day.
That the post you shared on LinkedIn?
Yeah, wasn't it fantastic? President Michael D. Higgins has condemned the obsession with achieving economic growth. And he wants to rebalance economy, ecology, and ethics. I mean, a strong critique of, you know, neoliberalism, and he said it's, the article says it's going to ruffle a few feathers, but we actually do need to think things differently. I don't know if you've read Kate Raworth about the donut economics. You know, this whole inexorable drive to more growth, efficiency, we are living beyond our planetary means, and we're going to actually do ourselves out of existence unless we actually rethink the way we're doing things. And so I actually do feel quite excited that if the president of Ireland can say something like that, you know, and we've got Kate Raworth at Oxford University, and she's, you know, I think her ideas are gaining traction. We actually really do have to make some systemic changes that are going to, you know, ruffle a few feathers, but we have to do them.
Yeah, that's maybe one of our taglines we're toying with, fundraising nest, ruffling feathers since 2023.
I love it.
And that's what we want to do here. We want to, you know, we want to bring the issues that we've got the I guess the beauty of a bit of a neutral stomping ground, and that's what I like about this new venture, that we can hear the voices from lots of people and bring it to a space and let people hear what is being said, and if it's important to them, action on it. And I know that the power of the people is everything, and so that's what I want to help champion through inviting you to be part of the hub. I know the power of letting people know what's going on. I know it gobsmacks me how many people have no idea in the charity sector what is going on, why it's important, and if we can play our part in spreading the message, because like you said, the messages or the narrative coming from the people that they maybe do get their sources from is not the only side, and who is saying the other side. And so you are absolutely this, you're living and breathing it. And I think it's really important that you're shining a light on this. Just before we wrap this up, if this bill potentially is going to go through, the report's out tomorrow, you said, so this is what turning it into something positive. What can we continue to do while the bill, like, to me, it feels desperate that it's going through, and then when it does, that we're stuck with this. But we have to somehow see something in this. What is that?
Well, you know, I think that, I mean, Labor in New Zealand obviously has a majority in Parliament. It's got a majority on the Select Committee. It's on record as saying it wants to push this through before the election. There is no ability to stop them. They have the numbers. They're going to do it. So, you know, but then we have an election in October, and this is a broken promise. And we had a sector group meeting on Monday, and the consensus that I took away was that people were feeling that the Labor government just doesn't care about charities. It does not care about charities. But which political parties do? You know, this is an opportunity for a political party to step up and say, look, we care about charities. We want to get the legal framework for charities right. You know, there's been a lot of research and work done into what a good legal framework for charities might look like. It's certainly a good place to start a discussion from. And I think the most important thing is that we do talk about these issues. And I'm very grateful to you for giving the opportunity, because it's only by talking about it.
You know, that is so, what gobsmacks me about this is government, that they don't really care about the charity sector, the third sector, the for-purpose sector. It was only back in 2018 that New Zealand was the third most generous country in the world. Like the social and economic benefits of New Zealand being the most generous country in the world are huge. We have you know, everyday Kiwis are incredibly generous, regardless whether it's $1 in a bucket or a major gift. We are known to be incredibly generous. And I think that they're not letting our sector, they're letting the people of New Zealand down by not acknowledging or recognizing their commitment to being generous humans in society. Like, I just don't understand that at all. And I think they're not looking at it from well, I don't understand. Yeah,
I know, it's really bizarre. I know. So, you know, we will never have better leverage than we do in the period before an election. So It really is the time to be talking about these issues, talking with politicians about these issues, you know, and challenging them. You know, what are you going to do for the charitable sector? How can we make the legal framework better? How can we be unleashing the potential of civil society? I mean, we're facing catastrophic climate change. We're facing, you know, widening inequality, so many intractable issues. What is the point in hobbling charities and stopping them from doing their work at a time when they are never more needed? We haven't thought this through, you know?
Yeah. And the recent side, you know, you're right when you talk about the climate. We're seeing the impacts of that right in New Zealand earlier this year. And I think the more, we don't want more instances like that but it is starting to, I see it more in social media. People are getting frustrated with the systems in place that respond, where the money's going in the aftermath. You know, all of these things are all part of the same kind of conversation and thoughts, aren't they? So I could talk to you for hours and hours, and I'm no doubt we will circle back on this. I really hope this is a topic that we can get the community in. Like everything, it's a slow burn. You know, the community, what we're doing here is just started, and it's like everything, it's going to take time to get momentum. But these are the conversations that I want to have, and I want people to get engaged with them. And we are delighted to have you. And thank you so much for your time. I always love talking to you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much to you as well. I could talk all day as well. So yes. Thank you.
All right, Sue. All right, until next time, bye.
See you, bye.